So the podcast format is changing for a while. Usually, one academic paper gets turned into easy information. But today is a full lesson on one big topic.
That's a really big topic.
Yeah. We're starting a fertilizer series called the NPK School. This series covers NPK and also small nutrients, such as boron and calcium.
Right.
But today is entirely about nitrogen, just nitrogen. Then the next deep dives will cover phosphorus and potassium, and after that, one deep dive will cover N, P, and K together.
It's going to be a deep dive.
It is. We will also debunk myths used by fertilizer resellers who promise miracle results. You should absolutely save these lessons and return to them when needed because, nitrogen is arguably the most demanding element we manage in the field.
Oh, without a doubt. We spend massive amounts of our budget on it, yet, a lot of it never actually makes it into the palm.
Right.
Which is exactly why we need to strip away the assumptions and just look at what is physically happening in the block.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. In plain words, what actually is nitrogen and what does it do in the palm?
Well, in plain words, nitrogen is the primary building block for the palm's growth. Without a constant, steady supply of it, biomass production it grinds to a halt.
It stops completely.
Yeah. The oil palm requires nitrogen to build structural plant tissues, to push out new fronds, and to expand its root system.
Okay.
And, crucially, it's needed to create the green pigment that catches sunlight.
The green pigment, you mean the stuff in the leaves?
Right. And once that green pigment, which is a molecule called chlorophyll, is produced, the palm can actually start generating the energy it requires to grow fruit.
I always like to look at the palm's leaf canopy as this massive solar-powered factory.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so nitrogen is basically the raw material used to manufacture the solar panels, those green leaves. The chlorophyll is what makes those panels capable of absorbing the sun's energy.
Exactly.
So if you don't have enough panels, or if the panels are, degraded and pale, the factory simply cannot produce its goods, which is the fruit bunches.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the mechanism at work. Adequate nitrogen ensures a large, expanding canopy.
And a larger canopy means more energy.
Exactly. More energy captured, which directly increases the number of fresh fruit bunches the palm produces. And it increases the physical weight of those individual bunches, too.
Do we have specific numbers on that? Like, how much does it actually help?
We do. We see this clearly in long-term field data. Applying the optimal rate of nitrogen, which sits right around 1,450 to 1,632 grams of nitrogen per palm per year.
Okay, so about 1,500 grams roughly.
Yeah, that can increase the productivity of fresh fruit bunches by up to 35%.
Wow. 35%.
Yeah, which translated to the block level, that is about 4.9 tons per hectare higher yield compared to palms left unfertilized.
Gaining nearly 5 tons per hectare just by optimizing one nutrient, that's a massive return on investment.
Huge.
But, understanding human nature, if a grower hears that nitrogen builds the factory and drives yield, the immediate temptation is to just double the dose.
Oh, wait.
Like, if 1,500 grams gets me 5 tons, surely 3,000 grams will get me 10 tons, right?
Yeah, but plant biology does not work like a bank account.
No.
No, it does not. And that mindset is actually actively destructive to the yield. There is a very real danger of excess here.
How so? What happens if they get too much?
Well, oil palms have two different biological pathways. Vegetative growth, which means building leaves and trunk, and reproductive growth, which means building flowers and fruit.
Okay, I'm tracking.
If palms get an oversupply of nitrogen, the plant shifts its priorities entirely. It assumes it is in this period of intense vegetative competition.
So it uses that extra nitrogen to just make extra leaves.
Exactly. It makes leaves at the expense of fruit. It actually decreases the proportion of female to male flowers, which is known as the sex ratio.
And because the palm produces both male and female flowers on the same tree, changing that ratio is completely devastating.
It really is. The male flowers just produce pollen.
Right, but the female flowers are the ones that actually develop into the heavy fruit bunches we want to harvest.
Precisely. So by overfeeding nitrogen, you are chemically signaling the palm to stop making the very thing you want to sell.
That is wild. You just end up with a block full of lush, massive, dark green leaves and very few fruit bunches.
Yeah, and beyond the loss of yield, excess nitrogen changes the physical structure of the plant. It makes the palm's cellular tissues much softer.
Soft tissues, that doesn't sound good.
It's terrible. It leaves the palm highly vulnerable to diseases and leaf-eating pests. And pushing massive amounts of nitrogen while other nutrients are depleted throws the palm totally out of balance. Like, if the palm is short on potassium or boron, Excess nitrogen can trigger a physiological disorder called white stripe on the leaves.
Okay, so the goal is definitely precision, not volume. Let's take this out of the field for a minute.
Sure.
If you're a field advisor walking through an oil palm block, you need to read the trees, right? How can you look at a block and instantly know it is starving for nitrogen?
Well, the visual symptoms are very specific. The most obvious sign is the leaflets lose that dark, flexible green and turn an overall pale, light green, or even yellow.
Okay, yellow leaves?
But the crucial, absolute defining characteristic here is that this yellowing always starts in the older, lower leaves.
The lower leaves.
Yes, not the new ones at the top.
Wait, why is that? Why wouldn't the whole tree just turn pale at once?
That specific pattern is the key to field diagnosis. And the reason for it is based on the concept of nutrient mobility.
Nutrient mobility, okay.
Right. So some nutrients are locked in place once they are built into a leaf, but nitrogen can move freely around inside the plant.
So it travels.
Exactly. When the oil palm senses that it is short on nitrogen from the soil, it goes into a strict survival mode.
Survival mode, what does it do?
To keep the vital new leaves at the top of the crown growing, the palm actually steals it from the old bottom leaves. It physically breaks down the proteins there, extracts the nitrogen, and ships it up the trunk to support the new growth.
Oh, wow. The palm is literally cannibalizing its oldest solar panels to build new ones.
That's exactly it.
It sacrifices the bottom fronds to keep the central assembly line running. That completely explains why the top of the palm stays green while the bottom turns yellow.
Yes, it's a brilliant survival tactic, but if that shortage is ignored and the deficiency becomes severe, the palm simply runs out of reserves.
And what happens then?
In severe cases, the tips and the edges of those pale lower leaves will curl up and die.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah, and the central stems of the leaves, the midribs, they might turn bright yellow or even orange. We see this distinct orange midrib symptom very often in flooded areas.
What about the overall shape of the tree? Does that change?
It does. The palm's growth will slow down, resulting in smaller new leaves. That gives the top of the crown this stunted, flat appearance, often called a flat top look.
Flat top. Got it.
And the trunk itself becomes slender and skinny instead of maintaining a robust, thick shape. You can even check the ground cover. Even the weeds growing underneath the palms might look pale green because the topsoil is completely depleted of nitrogen.
Honestly, seeing those symptoms has got to be incredibly frustrating for a grower, especially if they just paid for fertilizer, applied it, and they still see yellow palms.
It's one of the biggest complaints I hear.
So what is actually causing low nitrogen in the blocks if they're putting fertilizer down?
Well, we have to look at the environmental and management causes. Things that happen between the bag and the root system.
Okay, let's break those down.
First is competition. If you have heavy, overgrown weeds or woody shrubs, their root systems are aggressive. They will eat the nitrogen before the palm roots can even reach it.
You are essentially paying to fertilize the weeds.
Exactly. Second is waterlogging. If the soil is flooded, standing water is not actually a good thing.
Even though you'd think it helps dissolve the fertilizer.
Right, but the roots are living tissue. They need to breathe oxygen to perform active transport and pull in nutrients. If they are flooded, the oxygen supply is cut off.
So they basically suffocate.
Yes. Their activity stops. They simply cannot absorb the fertilizer, even if it's right next to them.
That is tragic.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the third cause?
Third is washing away, which we call leaching. In very porous soils or during heavy rains, the nitrogen just dissolves and washes completely past the root zone.
Deep into the earth where the roots can't grab it.
Yep. And fourth is evaporating into the air or volatilization.
Volatilization. Evaporating as a gas.
Yes. If urea is broadcast and left sitting on top of dry, hot soil, it literally converts into ammonia gas and simply floats away into the atmosphere.
Wow. You're watching your budget evaporate. Weeds eating it, roots drowning, heavy rain washing it away, and heat turning it into gas.
That's a harsh environment out there.
It really highlights why treating every block the same is a recipe for failure. The soil beneath your feet completely changes the rules of the game.
Absolutely. Soil context dictates your field practice.
So let's walk through the specific soil types you might have in your block. Let's give some targeted do and do not guidance.
Perfect. Let's start with peat soils.
Okay, peat soils. What's the context there?
Peat naturally has a massive amount of organic nitrogen, but drainage is everything. The primary risks are waterlogging and washing away.
So what is the do for peat?
Do keep the water level exactly at 40 to 60 centimeters below the surface and apply your urea on moist surfaces.
And the do not.
Do not ever apply fertilizer when the block is flooded. The roots just can't breathe to absorb it. Also, as a side note, peat generally needs extra copper and zinc, though we're mostly focusing on nitrogen today.
Right. Keep focused on N today.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, sandy soils.
Sandy soils are very loose and porous, so the massive risk here is fast washing away or leaching of your nutrients.
So what's the game plan for sand?
Do split your yearly fertilizer into several smaller doses so the roots actually have time to catch it before it washes away.
Spoon feed the sand.
Exactly. And do not apply large amounts of nitrogen all at once. It's a total waste.
Makes sense. Now, what about heavy clays? That's the exact opposite, right?
Right. Heavy clays are made of tiny particles that stick together tightly, so the risk here is compaction and surface waterlogging, like puddling.
So what's the do for heavy clay?
Do ensure your channels are clear so water can escape. And apply only when the soil is slightly moist, not soaking wet.
And the big do not.
Do not allow heavy machines, like trucks or excavators, into the block when it is wet. It will compact the soil into a hard brick, and that stops root growth entirely.
Okay, now let's compare alluvial soils, the coastal ones, with strongly acidic mineral soils found inland.
This is an important distinction. Coastal alluvial soils handle standard urea very well, but inland acidic soils pose a really high risk for that ammonia volatilization we talked about.
The gas evaporating.
Yes. So on coastal soils, do apply urea directly. It's very cost effective. But on inland acidic soils, do consider alternatives like ammonium sulfate.
Because it doesn't turn into gas as easily.
Right. Or make sure urea is applied when the soil is properly moist to speed up its breakdown into the soil before it evaporates.
What about acid sulfate soils?
Those are tricky. They have a hidden pyrite layer under the surface. If you drain them too much and air hits that layer, it creates actual sulfuric acid.
Whoa.
Yeah, so for acid sulfate soils, do keep the water table constantly above that pyrite layer while managing your surface drainage.
And finally, volcanic soils.
Volcanic soils are naturally very fertile, so do not over-apply synthetic nitrogen or you'll easily trigger that vegetative overgrowth and ruin your sex ratio.
So we've got the soils covered. Now, what are the absolute best practices for getting the most out of the nitrogen you buy? Well, let's plug the holes in this leaky bucket.
Let's do it. First rule, timing.
Timing is everything.
It really is. You must apply after rain when the soil is still moist, but never right before a massive storm.
Because it will just wash away into the trenches.
Exactly. And never during a dry spell because the heat guarantees it will just turn into gas.
Okay, second rule. Placement. Where exactly should it go?
For palms over 3 years old, scatter the fertilizer in a ring about 50 to 100 centimeters away from the base of the trunk.
Why that specific distance?
Because that is exactly where the active feeding roots live. Do not dump it in a pile right against the trunk. It's inefficient and it chemically burns the palm.
Ouch. What about frequency?
Split the annual amount into at least 2, preferably 3, applications per year.
Spread the risk out.
Exactly. And don't forget free nitrogen sources. Use nature to your advantage.
Free nitrogen? How?
Plant creeping legume cover crops like mucuna or puraria. They have special bacteria that literally pull nitrogen out of the air and put it into the soil.
A biological fertilizer factory running for free. I love that.
Yeah, and also properly spread your empty fruit bunches and prune fronds in the rows to rot down and recycle their nitrogen.
Smart. Recycle what you already paid for. Okay, let's bring up the final and perhaps most important lesson of the NPK school today.
Protecting the wallet.
It's exactly. Protecting your wallet from fertilizer resellers promising miracle results.
Oh, there's so much slick marketing out there. We need to debunk 2 massive field myths right now.
Hit me. Myth 1. More nitrogen always means more yield.
Fact. As we discussed earlier, once the palm has what it needs, extra nitrogen just grows leaves, invites disease, and wastes your money.
Okay, myth 2. Any yellow leaf means you need to buy nitrogen.
Fact. If the young leaves are yellow, or if the yellowing is in spots, it might be a shortage of magnesium or potassium. Remember, nitrogen yellowing always starts on the old leaves. Accurate diagnosis is required before spending money.
So how do we see past the flashy packaging and confusing brand names at the supply store?
You have to know how to read the label. The name on the bag does not matter at all. The only thing that matters is the percentage of elemental nitrogen.
Give us some baselines.
Standard urea contains 46% nitrogen. Ammonium sulfate contains about 20.6 to 21% nitrogen, plus some sulfur.
Okay, so to compare products, you ignore the total bag weight and calculate the cost per kilogram of actual nitrogen.
Exactly. If a reseller pushes a special new blend, look at the back of the bag. It is usually just standard urea or ammonium mixed with a filler, like sand, to make it heavy. Don't pay for fancy names. Pay for the guaranteed percentage of the nutrient.
That calculation is your primary defense against overpaying. Pay strictly for the active element.
Always.
All right, we've covered the biology, the soil mechanics, and the economics of nitrogen today. Let's wrap up this lesson with clear, immediate steps to take based on this deep dive into the source material.
I think that's a great idea.
So here are your actions for tomorrow. Number 1, walk through your porous-looking block and look specifically at the oldest, lowest leaves. If they are pale yellow, you likely have a nitrogen shortage.
Better.
Number 2, check your drainage paths. If water is sitting on the soil, your palms are drowning and cannot eat no matter how much fertilizer is there.
They need to breathe.
Right. Now, your decisions for the next month. Number 1, decide to manually slash or clear heavy weeds around your palms before your next fertilizer application. Don't feed the ground cover.
Don't fertilize the weeds.
Exactly. Number 2, look at the label of the fertilizer you currently buy and calculate the actual cost per kilogram of pure nitrogen. Use that number to decide if you are getting a fair deal.
That is the most practical advice you can take to the field.
I'm glad you agree. So I want to leave you with this final thought. The palms in your block are constantly communicating their internal chemistry through their canopy structure and leaf color. Are you reading the signals they are sending, or are you just following a spreadsheet? Thanks for listening.